Welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm Kathleen Walter. With us now on the phone is a man who says he doesn't want former New York Governor Elliot Spitzer to get a free pass in his bid for New York City comptroller. E. O'Brien Murray joins us now, once named campaign manager of the year. He helped elect Republican Bob Turner to Congress in the bid for Anthony Weiner's old congressional seat, and also Simcha Felder to the New York State Senate. And Obi, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, according to the New York Post, you're trying to knock Eliot Spitzer off the ballot. Can you share with us what you're doing and why?
Well, simply put, Eliot Spitzer is trying to re-enter politics the same way he did it, full of lies and deceit, and he may even be committing fraud and other illegal activities to get on the ballot.
And can you cite some examples?
Well, the New York petition process is a very tedious one, a lot of requirements. He got it done in 4 days. There's public reports that he was paying his petitioners to gather signatures per signature, which is illegal, and you can't do that, so that would throw somebody out like that. There's also questions about whether or not he was inducing people to sign by having a party and say, if you sign, you can come into the party, things like that. The petitions themselves are ripe with errors as well as cross-outs. Some of the corrections they made were initialed, other ones were not. The question for the attorneys to look at is that legal as well, and is that fraud when they do that?
A recent Quinnipiac poll shows that despite Eliot Spitzer's scandalous past, he actually has a firm lead in the Democratic primary. 48% of registered Democratic voters said that they'd vote for him. His camp says that they're not worried about getting knocked off the ballot. Should they be?
Well, I think in this process, anything can happen. And at the end of the day, the courts will end up having to decide this one, much like they have in the past. Last year, when I took a sitting state senator to court over petitions, it turned out that the senator had claimed to have seen a woman that had been dead for more than 2 years sign his petitions. So anything can happen in this process. And
real quickly, can you walk us through the steps that you'll be taking in this process?
Well, sure. The first thing you have to do is go through the petitions line by line to make sure the registered Democrats signed his petitions. The other parts are the people that carried the petitions have to make sure that they are registered Democrats or notary republics to be able to do the same thing. You look for any other changes that were made that may disqualify pages or volumes at that point, because if they were done incorrectly, none of it would count for whole sections of the petitions. So it's a pretty painstaking and detailed process. Takes a lot of work, but again, the attorneys can also look at things and say, this is done wrong, this is done fraudulently, this is done, this is a question for the courts, not for the Board of Elections. So there's a lot of various parts that can really cast a shadow over this campaign that Eliot Spitzer started. Like I say, he's doing it the same way he came in before. He filed his financial report yesterday, and the only thing he showed that he spent in the past week was $15,000 to a PR firm, or that he owes it, didn't even pay it yet. And the claim from his attorneys is that none of the bills showed up till after the filing deadline. So, I mean, it's just amazing the kind of campaign finance irregularities that he's already starting this campaign off with, and I expect the same thing from his petitions.
Obi, some have speculated that Eliot Spitzer's comptroller bid could actually drag down Anthony Weiner's mayoral prospects. Do you see that happening?
Well, it's interesting how the two get linked together. Bob Turner actually had won the seat formerly held by Anthony Weiner, so I'm pretty familiar with Anthony Weiner's former constituents in that part of the city, in Brooklyn and Queens. And I think Anthony stands on his own for the most part. I think there are going to be some voters that say, hey, how much is too much? We don't need to be the laughingstock of the country at this point of the world. Imagine Anthony Weiner and Eliot Spitzer at Times Square on New Year's Eve. I thought we cleaned up that place.
Now, Democrats outnumber Republicans in New York City 7-1. Can a Republican win the New York City comptroller race, and how do you view Republican candidate John Burnett?
Well, first off, John Burnett has been making great inroads in the Republican Party. He's a first-time candidate. He's a black Democrat, actually, too. I don't know if you're aware of that. And he's out there bringing in people to the Republican Party that aren't usually with us from the beginning, which is terrific. So that's one thing as far as John Burnett's concerned. But the other part of this is really when you look at a Republican, the Democrats haven't won City Hall for 20 years between Bloomberg and Rudy Giuliani. So a Republican can win citywide. Usually what happens is the down-ticket races don't have a lot of attention, so people just vote straight party. In this case, with Eliot Spitzer on the ballot right now, it's going to bring a lot of attention to this race, which means John Burnett can start raising more money, become more visible. People will say, wait a second, do I want Eliot or not? Usually they just vote Democrat because they don't really care. So it's definitely something that could be won by Republicans.
Last question for you, Opie. The fact that both Anthony Weiner and Eliot Spitzer are doing so well in the polls, what does this tell us about politics? Does sex sell even in politics? And are you concerned that American voters are maybe lowering their moral standards for elected officials?
Well, we can look across the country, too. I think these guys are all looking at Mark Sanford and what happened in South Carolina as well. And I think what really has happened is any of these scandals have increased any name ID they had. Mark Sanford in a Republican district, Eliot Spitzer and Anthony Weiner in a Democratic district, in this case New York City. And when the name ID is up there and they've got money, Eliot Spitzer is self-funding. Anthony Weiner is sitting on millions of dollars he raised before his scandal because he was going to run for mayor 4 years ago, chose not to, so he sat on that money. So anyone who's got millions of dollars, and Sanford, by the way, didn't really fund a lot of his campaign through himself or fundraising. He ran a pretty low-budget campaign, but they all have the name ID. So it's not that sex sells. I think it's the name ID, and you can't beat somebody with nobody. Each of these races in and of themselves are very unique. Anthony Weiner's got a four-way primary at this point, which means somebody in the Democratic primary has to get more than 40% in the primary. When that doesn't happen, which is most likely to happen, the top two have a runoff. Mark Sanford had a runoff 2 weeks after his Republican primary. And the person that he ran up against had no opportunity to organize within 2 weeks and had no money. Eliot Spitzer got in this race with 4 days to go for petitions, is going against a single Democrat, one person, a guy named Scott Stringer, who's New York County or Manhattan Borough president, which is, everybody knows, the island of Manhattan. But outside Manhattan, they don't know who he is. So Eliot Spitzer, with his millions of dollars, which he's gotten from his father from the real estate empire, is able to go out there and basically buy an election. And that's what's kind of scary. I don't think it's the question of sex selling or the scandal doing it, but each of these men in their various races has found a way to exploit their weakness, or use their weakness, rather, for their benefit.
All right, Obie Murray, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.